head. Oh, it's been a ride, but I made my mind up. Rising from the bottom to the ground begins with me. From this day on, this day on, this day on, from this day on.
A good Erev Shabbos, a Chodesh Tov, and a Chag Urim Sameach. Right? So good Shabbos, but good in Erev Shabbos because it's almost Shabbos. Chodesh Tov because we're celebrating a new month. It's Rosh Chodesh, Saturday and Sunday. So it's a 2-day Rosh Chodesh that begins tonight. And Hag Urim Sameach, Hag Sameach. May you have a beautiful and good festival, the Festival of Light. Happy Hanukkah. How's everybody doing? It's a triple header this Shabbos. If you're going to synagogue, we'll be reading from 3 different Torah scrolls. Let's light up the darkness. Okay, and that was Distant Cousins. What was the name of that song? This Day On, from their album Next of King. Beautiful, beautiful, famous stories from the Talmud on today's page. Who is with us today? Beth giving us one of these, like this. Guy in Ohio, Gordo from Scotland, right? Happy Hanukkah. Kelly from Texas, Helena from Finland, Christo from Lubbock, Elise from Canada, Paula from the Great Northwest, Steven from New Hampshire, Tom in PA, and Paula, to all that you said, amen. Let me reload that page. It seems stuck. Okay, I think everything is fine over there on Facebook. But this is why we need to build the AT app. We shouldn't need Facebook. We'll keep putting it on Facebook. We'll keep putting it on YouTube. But it would be better if you could connect with us directly through the AT app. That's what we're building now. That's what we're in our annual campaign. Our annual campaign funds all our operations and will continue to do so that we can have AT Daily, so that we can share the table for 5, so that Nina can write her hero stories, so that we can have podcast guests, and we have a lot more planned. But specifically, our focus this year is to build the AT app. So please support our annual campaign. All donations are doubled. Thanks to our generous matchers. Donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. We're looking for 100% participation from the AT Daily community, and we're in very good shape. So many people who are here every day have already donated, and we thank you so much for your support. And let's get everybody in there. Donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. Today, and over there on the YouTube side, who's with us today? Lynn in North Texas. Okay, today's episode of AT Daily is sponsored by Sharon Savage. She says, I would like to dedicate an episode of AT Daily to our AT community. I admire the dedication of the community despite the busy schedules and other challenges coming our way. This inspires me and it strengthens me in my own journey through the Talmud. Thank you, Sal and Nina, for making all this possible. May all of us be strengthened to continue and complete this journey with God's help. Amen. And Sharon, may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings, even more than you could have imagined. And we all say, Amen. All right. Where are we holding? This is Daf Chaf Aleph, page 21, here in Tractate Tainus, the 10th volume of the Talmud, the laws of public fasts, and as we've seen, spectacularly interesting and inspiring digressions as we make our way through this tractate. We're in chapter 3. There's only one Mishna in this chapter, and this is the Mishna is all about. Okay, so we know that they'll declare a fast day when the rainy season is late in the land of Israel in ancient times. What other sorts of calamities or dangers could confront a community and lead the community to declare a fast day? That's the general subject of this chapter. Chapter 3 of 4. By the way, I think yesterday's episode was 691, right? So we're on. We've done 690. Today's a 692nd episode that we've gathered together to make our journey through the Talmud, and there are 2,711 pages total. So we're approaching 700, and then there'll be about 2,000 to go. Okay, that's why it's a 7.5-year journey. We picked this up. Right at the bottom of the B side of page 20, where we were yesterday, and we were talking about the beautiful attributes of the saintly Rav Huna. And the Gemara further relates, when Rav Huna would eat bread, he would open the doors to his house, saying, "Whoever needs, let him come in and eat." And Rava said, well, I can fulfill all these customs of Rav Huna, all these generous customs that we were talking about at the end of yesterday, except for this one, that he opens his house and lets anyone come and take bread. Why could Rava not do? He says, I cannot do this one due to the fact that there are many soldiers in the city of Mechoza, where he was living in Bavel, in the Babylonian Jewish community. And if I let all of them come and eat, they will take all the food I own. So you want to be saintly and generous, but you have to have some wisdom about it as well. And you can't be so generous that, the wrong kind of people will come and take advantage of your generosity, leave you impoverished and unable to help the more worthy, and moreover to make a living and teach and share his Torah with the world, which was, Rav's real calling. Rava. Okay, new subject. We were talking yesterday about dilapidated walls, right? And this is the sort of archetypal type of danger, the archetypal sort of danger that the Talmud lists as in order to illustrate its teaching that we do not put ourselves in a situation where we're going to need a miracle to save our lives. In other words, we don't endanger ourselves unnecessarily, right? Because if you put yourself in a place of danger and it's going to require some kind of a miracle to save you, then it for one thing, God gives us life. We have to take care of ourselves and our lives so that we can, be in this world longer and perform more mitzvahs. Right? We're sent in this world for a mission, to do God's will, both the mitzvahs that are commanded to us in the Torah and also to bear fruit in this world, to do that thing that we were sent into the world to do. And if we endanger our lives, right, then we're playing poker with our souls in a sense, right? Our soul was sent here on a mission, and if we die early because we took foolish risks, then it's like we're despising that which God granted us, right? You really have an obligation to take care of yourself in this world and to avoid danger. And the dilapidated wall, walking under a wall that could easily fall on you, that's avoidable, right? So easy to take it, walk a little further away from the wall where you won't be in danger. So don't take foolish risks. And the Gemara relates another story that involves an unstable wall. Ilfa and Rabbi Yochanan studied Torah together. Ilfa was an older sage, so they were contemporaries and colleagues, but Ilfa was really the senior, and Rabbi Yochanan and other places would transmit teachings in Ilfa's name. But they were studying together, and as a result, they became very hard-pressed for money, right? These guys weren't working, they were studying Torah 16 hours a day. So they said, let us get up and go and engage in commerce, and we will fulfill with regard to ourselves the verse from Deuteronomy 15:4, although there should be no needy among you, as we will no longer be complete paupers, right? So everyone should be making a living, and we should be making a living. We shouldn't be paupers. And they went and they sat under a dilapidated wall, and they were eating bread when two ministering angels arrived. Rabbi Yochanan heard that one angel said to the other, "Let us knock down this wall upon them and kill them," as they abandon the eternal life of Torah study in order to engage in the temporal life of business for their own sustenance. And the other angel said to him, "Leave them, as there is one of them whose time of achievement stands before him," i.e., his time has yet to come. Whatever they've already accomplished as Torah scholars, it's not nearly as, grandiose as what one of them has ahead of him. And so Rabbi Yochanan heard this conversation among these angels that were behind the wall, or in the wall, or above the wall, wherever they were. But Ilfa did not hear the angels' conversation. Rabbi Yochanan said to Ilfa, "Did the master hear anything?" Ilfa said to him, "No." Rabbi Yochanan said to himself, "Since I heard the angels and Ilfa did not hear, I can learn from this that it is I whose time of achievement still stands before him, has not yet arrived." So Rabbi Yochanan said to Ilfa, "I've changed my mind. I will return home and I will fulfill with regard to myself the contrary verse, for the poor shall never cease out of the land." Right, so this was as the children of Israel were awaiting their entrance into the promised land, right, after the 40 years of wandering in the desert. Moses would not be able to enter with them. Joshua would enter the land with them. And so for a long time, we were living, our people were living at this very elevated spiritual state, where God had given us the land and, pushed out the previous inhabitants who were involved in child sacrifice and other unsavory practices. And then, we moved in, and we had the tabernacle for a while, and then eventually the temple was built in a place selected by David and built by Solomon, etc. And it was almost like a paradise on earth. Eventually, our level fell. We didn't maintain our high spirituality, and so we no longer merited to have the temple in our midst. Eventually, the second temple was destroyed, etc., and the people fell away. But the idea was that if the Jewish people would have lived in the ancient kingdom of Israel at a high, lofty level of Torah observance, it could have lasted forever. And nobody would, no woman would miscarry. I mean, God made all kinds of amazing promises if we would have just kept up our end of the covenant. Now, even though we were going to be living at this lofty, exalted level and things were going to be so beautiful in the land, nevertheless, it said in the Torah that there would never cease to be poor among you. Perhaps because when the poor are among us, we have the opportunity to give tzedakah, to give to charity, right? It's almost like when you give to charity, the person who's receiving the charity is doing you a favor as well, because he enables you to fulfill that beautiful and lofty mitzvah, beautiful deed of giving charity. So the Torah had said there would always be paupers among you, there would always be the poor among you. So Rabbi Yochanan says, you know what? I'm going to just remain a pauper so that I can just stay focused on Torah study. I know that we were talking about we would go and start a business so we wouldn't be so poor, but you go start the business. It's good that you do that. But for me, I'm just going to go back to the study hall. I will return. So Rabbi Yochanan returned to the study hall, and Ilfa did not return, but he went to engage in business instead. By the time that Ilfa came back from his business travels, Rabbi Yochanan had been appointed the Rosh Yeshiva. He had been appointed the head of the academy, and his financial situation had improved. It's not like he became rich, but he wasn't, starving pauper. His colleagues said to Ilfa, if the master had sat and studied instead of going off to his business ventures, wouldn't the master have been appointed head of the academy? Since Ilfa was senior to Yochanan, And Yochanan got appointed the head of the academy. If Ilfa had stayed, he would have been appointed the head of the academy. Ilfa, what did Ilfa do? I guess he was really brokenhearted about this. He said, I shouldn't have done it. I should have just stayed in the study hall. What did he do? Ilfa went and suspended himself from the mast of a ship, Ascaria. And he said, if there is anyone who can ask me a question concerning a baraisa, a teaching, a contemporary with the Mishna, of Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Oshaya, and I do not resolve his problem from a Mishna, I will fall from the mast of this ship and be drowned. In other words, Ilfa sought to demonstrate that despite the time that he had spent away in business, he still retained his extensive Torah knowledge. A certain old man came and taught a baraisa before him in front of Ilfa. And he said, if there is a man who, upon his deathbed, says in his will, give a shekel to my sons every week. But this is a situation where, based on their needs, they are fit for the court to give them a sela, i.e. 2 shekels, double the amount. So then you should give them a sela. Why? When the dying man mentioned a shekel, he presumably meant that they should be given a sum in accordance with their actual requirements so that they could keep up their household, not the specific amount of a shekel. But if he said, give them only a shekel, well, then the court gives them only a shekel and no more, because the man made his views clear, right? When he said give them a shekel, it seems like we should take that to mean give them what they need, and a shekel is like just a round number. So give them what they need. But if he said give them only a shekel, well, then he had a specific number in mind. And the Baraisa further states that if this man said, if my sons die, others should inherit their portion in their stead, well then, regardless of whether he said give them a shekel or whether he said give them only a shekel, the court gives his sons only a shekel per week, as their father clearly stated that he wishes to give his sons a specific stipend and that he intends to leave the bulk of his property to others, the ones who inherit after the sons. Ilfa said to the old man, in accordance with whose opinion is this ruling? It is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who said, it is a mitzvah, it is a commandment to fulfill the statement of the dead, right? What the dead say in their will, we do, if it's possible. And this entire baraisa can be explained based on a principle that appears in a Mishnah. In all cases, one should try to execute the wishes of the deceased. Now, what's interesting about the story, they leave it there. So, did Ilfa prove that his knowledge of the Mishnah was so extensive that he should have been appointed the head of the academy? He said, I will resolve any problem from a baraisa that people bring to me, right? He said, anyone who can ask me a question concerning a baraisa of Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Oshaya. But the baraisa that this man brought about fulfilling the wishes of a dying man was a baraisa from Rabbi Meir. So that was not part of Ilfa's challenge, and so presumably his knowledge was respected, and we transmit teachings in Ilfa's name. So I don't think he threw himself off the mast and he didn't have to drown himself. New subject. The Gemara relates another story about a rundown building. And now we get into the story of Nachum Ish Gam Zu, the very famous Talmudic character and sage, Nachum Ish Gam Zu, Nachum from Gamzu. They said about Nachum Ish Gam Zu that he was blind in both eyes. Both his arms were amputated, both his legs were amputated, and his entire body was covered in boils. And he was lying in a dilapidated house, and the legs of his bed were placed in buckets of water so that ants should not climb onto him, as since he had no arms or hands, obviously, he couldn't remove the ants from his body. So they wanted to protect him from insects crawling up the legs of the bed, since he was only a torso without arms or legs, and he wouldn't be able to, remove them from himself. Once his students sought to remove his bed from the house, and afterward remove his other vessels. Right? The house was falling apart and they want to move him into a better facility. He said to them, my sons, remove the vessels first and afterward remove my bed, as I can guarantee you that as long as I am in the house will not fall. Indeed, they removed the vessels, and afterward they removed him in his bed, and immediately the house collapsed. His sons said to him, Rabbi, since you are a holy righteous man, or you seem to be a holy righteous man, as we have just seen that as long as you were in the house it did not fall, why has this suffering befallen you? That your arms and legs were removed and your skin is covered in boils. Why did this terrible thing happen to you? And he said to them, my sons, I brought it upon myself. And Nachum of Gamzu related to them the following. Once I was traveling along the road to my father-in-law's house, and I had with me a load distributed among 3 donkeys, one of food, one of drink, and one of delicacies. Right? So he was a Torah scholar and a well-to-do man. And he was bringing 3 donkeys full of provisions, right? A wealthy man. And a poor person came and stood before me in the road, and he said, my rabbi, sustain me. Give me food. I said to him, wait until I unload my donkey, after which I will give you something to eat. Now, unloading a donkey, we're taught, that's a specific commandment in the Torah, that you unload your animal. You don't leave your animal suffering under its burden when you reach a destination. You have to unload the animal. You have to do that right away. So it was a righteous thing to do. However, I had not managed to unload the donkey before this beggar's soul left his body. This person was so hungry, he was able to say, feed me, but his life left his body before Nachum could unload his donkey. Nachum says, I went and I fell upon his face. Right? He went and fell on the man who just died. And he said, may my eyes, which had no compassion on your eyes, be blinded. May my hands, which had no compassion on your hands, be amputated. May my legs, which had no compassion on your legs, be amputated. And may my mind not rest. And my mind did not rest until I said, may my whole body be covered in boils. Now, he felt terrible that he didn't give this man who was dying of hunger food as soon as he asked for it. And terrible that the man died. But he cursed himself in his fit of despair at having ignored the pleas of the poor man. I mean, he could have resolved, to scholar, the words of a sage, the words of a tzaddik are often fulfilled. And his own curse against himself, as we see, was fulfilled. His students said to him, even so, woe to us that we have seen you in this state. And Nachum said to them, woe is me if you had not seen me in this state. Why would he say such a thing? He seems to be saying he's happy that he has been so punished, deprived of his arms, his legs, his eyes, and he's covered in boils. Why would he prefer to be in this state than whole? Because his suffering atones for him. Nachum was a holy, righteous man. This was like the only sin he ever committed. He suffered terribly for it, sort of by his own curse, but he could be sure that the suffering that he endured in this world is all the suffering that is coming to him. He was just very confident, and I think we can be confident for him, that he went right to a super elevated place in the next world. He had no further refining or punishment to suffer. Any temporary stay in Gehenna was not for him. He's going right to a lofty place in the heavenly academy. And the Gemara inquires, and here's the more famous story about him. I mean, this is his end. It just sounds terrible. But why do they call him Nachum Ish Gam Zu? And the reason is that with regard to any matter that occurred to him, he would say, Gamzu Letova. This too is for the good. Now, he totally demonstrated that was the worst possible thing that could have happened to him. He was, lost his arms, legs, and eyes. And he still was saying this too is for the good because I've done all my suffering in this world. I will not have further suffering in the next world. But he was always living that way. And here's the beautiful story that demonstrates that from when he was still a young, robust man. And so he would always say, this too is for the good. Gamzu Letova. Once, the Jews wished to send a gift, doron, to the house of the emperor of Rome. And they said, who should go and present this gift? Well, let Nachum Ish Gam Zu go, as he is accustomed to miracles, right? He was a super righteous person. He's accustomed to miracles. So they sent with him a chest, a sifta, full of jewels and pearls. And he went and he spent the night in a certain roadside inn. During the night, the residents of the inn arose and they took all the precious jewels and pearls out of the treasure chest and they replaced them with earth, with dirt. The next day, when he saw what had happened, Nachum Ish Gam Zu said, Gamzu Letova. This too is for the good. Can you imagine? He's entrusted with a treasure being sent to Caesar as a tribute. Like very important, right? That treasure is being sent as a tribute to Caesar. So it's like the welfare and well-being of the whole community that he's representing, is tied to that tribute, that tax, as it were, really, that's going to Caesar. And now he only has a box full of dirt. I mean, any one of us would probably say, oh my God, totally freaking out. He said, but this too is for the good. When he arrived there at Caesar's palace, they opened the chest and they saw that it was filled with dirt. And the Caesar wished to put all the Jewish emissaries, right? So I guess Nachum was accompanied by others, and he wished to kill all of them. And he said, the Jews are mocking me. So he's going to kill their messengers, and probably, bad decrees are going to go back to the Jewish community in Israel. Nachum Ish Gam Zu said, Gamzu Letova. This too is for the good. That Caesar wants to kill all of them. He said, this too is for the good. What happened? Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, came and he appeared before Caesar as one of his ministers. This minister, who's really Elijah, said to Caesar, perhaps this dirt is from the dirt of their father Abraham. This earth is from the earth of their father Abraham. As when he threw earth, it turned into swords, and when he threw hay, it turned into arrows. As it is written in a prophecy that the sages interpreted this verse as a reference to Abraham, Isaiah 41:2, his sword makes them as the dust, his bow as the driven hay. And there was one province that the Romans had been unable to conquer. So they took some of this earth, this dirt in the box that Nachum Ish Gam Zu brought, and they tested it by throwing it at their enemies. And lo and behold, the Roman army was finally able to conquer that province. When the Caesar saw that this earth indeed had miraculous powers, his servants entered his treasury and they filled Nachum Ish Gam Zu's chest with precious jewels and pearls and sent him off with great honor. Right? He was not able to deliver a chest of jewels and pearls. Instead, he delivered dirt. It performed a miracle for Caesar. They filled the chest with jewels and pearls, and they sent him back home with the chest filled with jewels and pearls. When Nachum Ish Gam Zu came to spend the night at the same roadside inn, the residents said to him, what did you bring with you to the Caesar that he bestowed upon you such great honor? So you can imagine, it wasn't just they filled his chest, they sent him probably with beautiful clothes and food and accompaniment and animals. And you could see that he'd been totally honored. Meanwhile, they were expecting that he would be killed since they sent him forward with dirt in that chest. And he said to them, well, that which I took from here, I brought there. Now, when they heard this, the residents of the inn thought that the soil upon which their house stood had miraculous powers. They tore down the roadside inn, and they brought the soil underneath it to the king's palace. And they said to him, the earth that was brought here, that performed miracles for you when this guy Nachum brought it, came from our property. We're the owners of the dirt, and here's a whole bunch more. You conquered one province with a chest full of dirt. We've brought you a wagon full of dirt, of that same dirt. Where am I? Of that same dirt. So the emperor, the Caesar, tested the soil that the residents of the inn brought. The Caesar tested it in battle, and it was not found to have miraculous powers. And so he had these residents of the former inn executed. The Mishnah taught, new story. So that was the tale of Nachum Ish Gam Zu, the one who said Gamzu Letova, very famous saying from the Talmud, and it's one that we should really all strive. That is something we should really all strive to do. No matter what happens, don't get put off. We're living in God's world. God's in control. Something terrible happens. Our fortunes take a dive. You know what? We don't know what's going to happen. It could be that this terrible misfortune today will prove to be the setup for something wonderful tomorrow. Gamzu Letova, this too is for the good. New story. The Mishnah taught what is considered a plague. We're back to the Mishnah. What is considered a plague of pestilence? Dever. If it is a city that sends out, so we're talking about plagues now, right? Plagues, diseases. If it is, and whether or not we should have a public fast because of it. So if it is a city that sends out 500 infantrymen, meaning there are 500 able-bodied men who live in the city, and 3 dead are removed from it on 3 consecutive days, 1 dead per day, this is a plague of pestilence. And the sages taught if a city that sends out 1,500 infantrymen, right, it has 1,500 able-bodied men, like, for example, the village of Akko, and 9 dead are removed from it on 3 consecutive days, i.e. 3 dead per day. So this is considered a plague of pestilence. Well, it makes sense. It's the same exact ratio. If in a city of 500 men, 3 die, 1 on each day for 3 days, that's a plague. Okay, so 1,500 men, 3 guys die, 1 on each of 3 days, 9 guys total. It's the same. It's a plague of pestilence. Makes sense. But if all 3 died on 1 day, or over 4 days, this is not a plague of pestilence. Now that's odd. You can say, okay, over 4 days, it seems like the death rate has been spread out, so it's a lower death rate. But if all those guys die in 1 day, since it was a plague of pestilence if they died over 3 days, and now they die over 1 day, but it's not a plague, why? An explanation of this counterintuitive ruling that many deaths in 1 day is not indicative of a plague, the Gemara relates, Drokart was a city that sent out 500 infantrymen, and 3 dead were removed from it in 1 day. So Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizda decreed a fast on account of the plague. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzhak said, in accordance with whose opinion did you declare this fast? It must be in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And this is related to the definition of a forewarned ox. And that is an animal, an ox, that has gored enough times to be considered a dangerous beast that requires careful supervision. Right? So the Torah speaks about the ox. If you own an ox and it goes out and kills somebody, it's a terrible accident. And you have a certain degree of liability, but not a lot. But if your ox had gone out and attacked people, once or twice or 3 times before, well, then it starts to become a different situation. And if you didn't carefully supervise that ox and keep it, fenced in, and you allowed it to get out, well, it was predictable that it would hurt somebody, and now you are liable at a much higher level. And with regard to this ox, Rabbi Meir said, the owner of an ox is liable to pay damages if its acts of goring were separated, i.e., if it gored 3 times on 3 consecutive days, as claimed by the rabbis. If its acts of goring were near each other, performed on a single day, is it not all the more so that this animal should be classified as a forewarned ox? However, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak continued, this represents a minority opinion. The rabbis didn't agree with Rabbi Meir. And just as Rabbi Meir's reasoning is rejected for the law in the case of an ox, so too it is rejected with regard to a plague. Upon hearing this impressive argument, Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda said to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, let the master arise and come to live with us as our community leader. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said to him, we have already learned in a Baraisa that Rabbi Yosei says, it is not the place of a person that honors him. Rather, the person honors his place. As we found with regard to Mount Sinai, that as long as the divine presence rested upon it, the Torah said, neither let the flocks nor the herds feed before that mountain. Right? When his presence was over Mount Sinai and giving the 10 Commandments with all the children of Israel gathered around. So that mountain was a holy place. You can't let the animals on it. You couldn't even let the people get too close, right? That totally sacred place. But once the divine presence went up from there and the children of Israel moved on, that mountain ceased to be a holy place. We don't even know where Mount Sinai is. So once the divine presence departed from the mountain, the Torah said, when the shofar sounds long, they shall come up to the mount. And this indicates that the sanctity was not inherent to the place, but was due to the divine presence resting there. And we likewise found with regard to the tent of meeting that was in the wilderness, the tabernacle, that whenever it was erected, the Torah said that they put out of the camp every mitzora, right? Every mitzora, everyone who had tsaras, right? Ritual leprosy, not leprosy the way we understand that disease, but anyone who was impure by virtue of touching something impure or other kinds of impurity. And once somebody who was suffering from tsaras, right? Somebody who had tsaras, right? The kind of impurity that led to this outbreak, a physical malady caused by a spiritual impurity. So all those people had to stay outside, away from the spot where the tabernacle was. But once the curtain was rolled up and the tent of meeting was prepared for travel, the Zavim and the lepers were permitted to enter the place where it had stood. And the place itself, that spot, had no intrinsic sanctity. Rather, it was sacred only because the divine presence was there. Accordingly, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak maintained that there is no reason for him to move places to receive honor, like going somewhere else, that's going to give him honor. But no, he's a great Torah scholar, so wherever he is, he lends honor to that place. I mean, that's why they wanted him to come to their village. But he was already, ensconced in a place and giving honor to that place, had relationships in that place. And even though they might have offered him, a bigger salary and a bigger community, and they could give him more honor by coming there, it's not the place that gives honor to the person, but the person who gives honor to the place. Rav Nachman bar Chisda said to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, if so, let me arise and come to the master to learn Torah from you. Right? So you're such a great Torah scholar. I want to be learning from you. If you won't come live where I live, then I'll come live where you live. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said to him, it is better that 100 dinars, that is the son of Peras, which is 50 dinars, should come to 100 dinars, that is the son of 100 dinars. But 100 dinars, that is the son of 100 dinars, should not come to 100 dinars, that is the son of Peras. In other words, although Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak was a learned scholar, comparable to this great sum of money, 100 dinars, it was nevertheless more appropriate for him to come to Rav Nachman bar Chisda. whereas Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak was the son of a Peras, an ordinary man. Rav Nachman bar Rav Hizda was the son of a scholar, right? So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak was sort of a greater scholar in his own right, but he came from an ordinary family. And what he's saying to his friend Rav Nachman bar Hizda is, listen, you're great, we're kind of on a level, but your father was a much more important person than my father. And so if anybody's moving, I should move to see you. Don't feel that you need to move to see me. And the outcome being, I'll stay where I am and you stay where you are, and we'll be good. Now the Gemara relates another story involving a plague. Once there was a plague of pestilence in Surah. But in the neighborhood of Rav, there was no pestilence. And the people therefore thought that this was due to Rav's great merit. However, it was revealed to them in a dream that Rav's merit was too great, and this matter was too small for the merit of Rav to be involved. Rather, his neighborhood was spared due to the acts of kindness of a certain man who would lend his hoe and shovel to prepare sites for burial. Right? So like the kind of plague that was involved, it wasn't going to endanger everybody. It was like a minor plague, kind of dangerous, but not super dangerous. And the fact that this area where Rava lived, had been spared, like they didn't need, God didn't need to invoke Rav's merit to save that neighborhood. It was enough that there was this one man who was a real Baal Chesed, somebody who, conducted his life in accordance with a principle of loving kindness. And what is it that he did? It's that he owned tools, and anybody who needed them to bury the dead, he would just, freely give them away and lend them and not charge a fee. And the Gemara relates a similar incident. In Drokart, there was a fire, but in the neighborhood of Rav Huna, there was no fire. And the people thought that this was due to the great merit of Rav Huna. But it was revealed to them in a dream. Interesting, it was revealed to them in a dream. Like it was revealed to them because they all had the same dream. And so that's how they knew that it was true. That this matter was too small for the merit of Rav Huna to have played a role. Rather, it was due to a certain woman who heats her oven and lends it, i.e. the use of her oven, to her neighbors. Right? So just these neighborly people. Anybody needs tools, you can borrow mine. If somebody needs an oven, you can borrow mine. And they said to Rav Yehuda, locusts have come to our region. Rav Yehuda decreed a fast. They said to him, they are not destroying anything as they are eating only a little. He said to them, have they brought provisions with them that they have something else to eat? Even if they are not damaging your crops now, they will certainly eat them soon, right? So let's be a little bit forward thinking. If locusts have arrived, maybe it doesn't seem so bad now, but it could quickly get worse, so let's have a fast. On another occasion, they said to Rav Yehuda, there is a pestilence, a plague, a disease among the pigs. Rav Yehuda decreed a fast, and the Gemara asks, well, let us say that Rav Yehuda maintains that a plague affecting one species will come to affect all species, and that is why he decreed a fast. And the Gemara answers no. In other cases, there is no cause for concern. However, pigs are different, as their intestines are similar to those of humans, and consequently, their disease might spread to people. Reading this daf now, hits me different than the last time I read this years ago, when we weren't really thinking about a disease spreading from animals to humans. Enough said. They said to Shmuel, there is pestilence in the region of Bechozai, which is quite a distance from Babylonia. And Shmuel decreed a fast, and they said to him, but it is far from here. And he said, there is no crossing between us and them that will stop the pestilence, and therefore there is cause for concern that it will reach us. In other words, there's no bridge that could be closed, to keep to quarantine that region. Since people freely go from one place to another, the disease could come to us. Again, another teaching that sounds different in the age of COVID than it would have before. And they said to Rav Nachman, there is a pestilence in the land of Israel. And Rav Nachman decreed a fast in Babylonia, which is quite far away, saying, well, if the lady of the house Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, is afflicted, is it not all the more so that the maidservant, Babylonia, will be afflicted also? I'm very close to done. If you have any questions or comments, get them in. And the Gemara asks, the reason for this ruling is apparently only because the land of Israel is a lady in comparison to the diaspora, the Jewish community around the world outside of Israel, which is likened to a maidservant. And it may be inferred from this that in a case involving a maidservant and a maidservant, i.e., two places in the diaspora, that there is no reason to fast. In other words, if the Jewish community in Yemen is having a plague, does the Jewish community in Babylonia need to declare a fast? But in the previous story, when they said to Shmuel, there is a pestilence in the region of Bechozai, he decreed a fast in Nehardea, despite the fact that Nehardea is not considered a lady with respect to Bechozai. And the Gemara answers, it is different there, since there are caravans that regularly travel between Ben Chozai and Nehardea, the pestilence will join and accompany them in the caravans. But we don't declare a fast just for, to be supportive, as it were, rather because that plague could physically come and reach us here. Okay, let's see if there are any questions or comments here on Tainus Chaf Aleph, Tainus page 21. Elise Scheinlin, so true about using wisdom in giving and mitzvahs to conserve generosity to the worthy who will continue to fulfill the guidance of Torah. And Tom, I hope the poor beggar also had an elevation of his soul too. Miracle not so good for the people of that province. Just so. Hold on. Right, Charles is repeating the teaching. It is the person that makes the place special and not the place that makes the person special. And it's a good time to remember that there's another teaching we have, it really matters almost more than who your companions are, who your neighbors are. That's counterintuitive. Now, it certainly matters very much who your companions are, right? You have to surround yourself with quality people who are on a similar journey to you, people who are aspiring to live a life of good values, right? That's the people you want to spend time with, that you want to associate with, that you want to befriend. You want to have friends and teachers and students and colleagues that share your values. Sometimes we think, well, but, my neighbors, I don't really need to talk to them. They're not necessarily my friends. It doesn't matter who my neighbors are. But it does. Because your neighbors, you can't change them. You can always pick and choose who you're going to go out to dinner with. You always have that choice. But once you move into a neighborhood, right, you don't have power over who's going to live in the houses around you. You only have that power to choose your neighbors before you buy your house. I mean, you have the power to leave. You can always leave the neighborhood. But it is very important, teaches our sages, to surround yourself with good people, the ones you spend time with and the ones that you live among, right? And if you think about why is that so important, because your children will end up playing with the kids of your neighbors, right? And if for some reason your neighbors don't share your values, if it's problematic, that community that you're living in, then you're not going to have a lot of control over, what values your children learn when they're outside of your home. So it's something to really think about. Bring honor to your place. Don't try to derive honor from the place that you live in, but pick your place carefully, because who are you going to be living among is important, right? Don't expect to derive honor from the place. Bring honor to it and choose your friends and neighbors wisely. That's what I have today. Please support our annual campaign. Help us share more Torah with more people and build the AT app so we're not subject to the glitches and whims and algorithms of social media. May you be blessed with a refreshing and rejuvenating Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, and Hanukkah. What's left of it tonight is 6 candles, and we'll light the 6 candles tonight before we light the Shabbos candles, because once we light the Shabbos candles, it's Shabbos, and you can't light the Hanukkah candles. All the best.